Mírzá Muḥammad Ali the Afnán. In the days of Baha'u'llah, during the worst times in the most great prison, they would not permit any of the friends either to leave the fortress or to come in from the outside. Skewcap and the Sayyid lived by the second gate of the city and watched there at all times, day and night. Whenever they spied a Baha'i traveler, they would hurry away to the governor and tell him that the traveler was bringing in letters and would carry the answers back. The governor would then arrest the traveler, seize his papers, jail him, and drive him out. This became an established custom with the authorities and went on for a long time. Indeed, for 9 years, until little by little the practice was abandoned. It was such a period that the Afnán, Haji Mírzá Muḥammad Ali, that great bough of the holy tree, journeyed to Akka, coming from India to Egypt and from Egypt to Marseille. One day I was up on the roof of the caravanserai. Some of the friends were with me and I was walking up and down. It was sunset, and that moment, glancing at the distant seashore, I observed that a carriage was approaching. "Gentlemen," I said, "I feel that a holy being is in that carriage." It was still far away, hardly within sight. "Let us go to the gate," I told them. "Although they will not allow us to pass through, we can stand there till he comes." I took 1 or 2 people with me and we left. At the city gate, I called to the guard, privately gave him something and said, "A carriage is coming in and I think it is bringing one of our friends. When it reaches here, do not hold it up and do not refer the matter to the governor." He put out a chair for me and I sat down. By this time the sun had set. They had shut the main gate too, but the little door was open. The gatekeeper stayed outside. The carriage drew up. The gentleman had arrived. What a radiant face he had. He was nothing but light from head to foot. Just to look at that face made one happy. He was so confident, so assured, so rooted in his faith, and his expression so joyous. He was truly a blessed being. He was a man who made progress day by day, who added every day to his certitude and faith, his luminous quality, his ardent love. He made extraordinary progress during the few days that he spent in the most great prison. The point is that when his carriage had come only part of the way from Haifa to Akka, one could already perceive his spirit, his light. After he had received the endless bounties showered on him by Baha'u'llah, he was given leave to go and he traveled to China. There, over a considerable period, he spent his days mindful of God and in a manner conformable to divine good pleasure. Later, he went on to India, where he died. The other revered Afnán and the friends in India felt it advisable to send his blessed remains to Iraq, ostensibly to Najaf, to be buried near the holy city. For the Muslims had refused to let him lie in their graveyard, and his body had been lodged in a temporary repository for safekeeping. Agha Sayyid Asadullah, who was in Bombay at the time, was deputized to transport the remains with all due reverence to Iraq. There were hostile Persians on the steamship, and these people, once they reached Bushehr, reported that the coffin of Mírzá Muḥammad Ali the Babi was being carried to Najaf for burial in the Vale of Peace, near the sacred precincts of the shrine, and that such a thing was intolerable. They tried to take his blessed remains off the ship, but they failed. See what the hidden divine decrees can bring about. His body came as far as Basra, and since that was a period when the friends had to remain in concealment, Sayyid Asdullah was obliged to proceed as if he were going on with the burial in Najaf. Meanwhile, hoping in one way or another to effect the internment near Baghdad. Because although Najaf is a holy city and always shall be, still the friends had chosen another place. God therefore stirred up our enemies to prevent the Najaf burial. They swarmed in, attacking the quarantine station to lay hold of the body and either bury it in Basra or throw it into the sea or out on the desert sands. The case took on such importance that in the end it proved impossible to bring the remains to Najaf, and Sayyid Asdullah had to carry them on to Baghdad. Here too there was no burial place where the Afnán's body would be safe from molestation at enemies' hands. Finally, the Sayyid decided to carry it to the shrine of Persian Salman the Pure, about 5 farsakhs out of Baghdad, and bury it in Ctesiphon, close to the grave of Salman, beside the palace of the Sasanian kings. The body was taken there, and that trust of God was, with all reverence, laid down in a safe resting place by the palace of Noshiravan. And this was destiny, that after a lapse of 1300 years from the time when the throne city of Persia's ancient kings was trampled down, and no trace of it was left except for rubble and hills of sand, and the very palace roof itself had cracked and split so that half of it toppled to the ground, this edifice should win back the kingly pomp and splendor of its former days. It is indeed a mighty arch. The width of its entryway is 52 paces, and its towers very high. Thus did God's grace and favor encompass the Persians of an age long gone, in order that their ruined capital should be rebuilt and flourish once again. To this end, with the help of God, events were brought about which led to the Afnán's being buried here, and there is no doubt that the proud city will rise up on this side. I wrote many letters about it, until at last the holy dust could be laid to rest in this place. Sayyid Asdullah would write me from Basra, and I would answer him. One of the public functionaries there was completely devoted to us, and I directed him to do all he could. Sayyid Asdullah informed me from Baghdad that he was at his wit's end and had no idea where he could consign this body to the grave. Wherever I might bury it, he wrote, they will dig it up again. At last, praise be to God, it was laid down in the very spot to which time and again the Blessed Beauty had repaired, in that place honored by his footsteps, where he had revealed tablets, where the believers of Baghdad had been in his company, that very place where the Most Great Name was wont to stroll. How did this come about? It was due to the Afnán's purity of heart. Lacking this, all those ways and means could never have been brought to bear. Verily, God is the mover of heaven and earth. I loved the Afnán very much. Because of him, I rejoiced. I wrote a long visitation tablet for him and sent it with other papers to Persia. His burial site is one of the holy places where a magnificent Mash'al Askar must be raised up. If possible, the actual arch of the royal palace should be restored and become the house of worship. The auxiliary buildings of the house of worship should likewise be erected there. The hospital, the schools and university, the elementary school, the refuge for the poor and indigent, also the haven for orphans and the helpless, and the travelers' hospice. Gracious God, that royal edifice was once splendidly decked forth and fair, but they are spider's web today, where hung the curtains of gold brocade, and where the king's drums beat and his musicians played. The only sound is the harsh cries of kites and crows. This is verily the capital of the owl's realm, where thou wilt hear no sound, save only the echo of his repeated calls. That is how the barracks were when we came to Akka. There were a few trees inside the walls, and on their branches as well as up on the battlements, the owls cried all night long. How disquieting is the hoot of an owl, how it saddens the heart. From earliest youth until he grew helpless and old, that sacred bough of the holy tree, with his smiling face, shone out like a lamp in the midst of all. Then he leaped and soared to undying glory, and plunged into the ocean of light. Upon him be the breathings of his Lord, the All-Merciful. Upon him, lapped in the waters of grace and forgiveness, be the mercy and favor of God.